He took everything, every single dollar, gone in one night. And the cruelest part, he didn't even leave a note. The next morning, as I stared at my phone screen, flashing one cold message, balance, $0, my heart stopped. Backhand index pointing right, but before we dive deeper into this unbelievable story, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe for more powerful real-life stories, and comment below telling us where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The numbers on the screen didn't lie. $0. I blinked, convinced my tired eyes were playing tricks. I rubbed them, refreshed the app, logged out and logged back in. But the result was always the same. Nothing. I leaned back into the old armchair that creaked under my weight, the same one I had bought decades ago after my first real paycheck. Back then, I was proud, hopeful, convinced that the sacrifices I made today would secure a brighter tomorrow. And now, that tomorrow was gone. I picked up the phone again, hands trembling, and called the bank. After minutes of robotic voices and endless transfers, a woman finally answered. Her tone was polite, professional, but merciless. Yes, ma'am. All transfers were authorized online. The funds were wired to an account under the name of Jackson Arthur Price. My chest tightened. Jackson. My son. My only son. I repeated his name softly, as if saying it out loud might change the reality. This wasn't a stranger. Not a hacker. Not some scammer. It was him. The boy I had carried on my back when my arms were too tired to hold groceries. The boy whose homework I stayed up nights to help with, even when I barely knew the answers myself. The boy I gave everything to, and now he had taken everything from me. For a moment, the phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I stared at the ceiling, searching for answers in the cracks of old plaster. The silence of the house was unbearable. The buzzing of a dying light bulb, the ticking of the wall clock, even the hum of the refrigerator, every sound seemed louder, crueler, mocking me. On the shelf in front of me, his childhood stared back through photographs. Jackson at 6 years old, missing front teeth and holding a balloon. Jackson, in his middle school uniform, nervously adjusting his tie. Jackson on graduation day, grinning ear to ear while I clapped harder than anyone in the crowd. Each memory was a knife twisting deeper. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the phone against the wall, tear those photographs to pieces, rip the curtains down until the room matched the storm inside me. But I didn't. My body refused. Instead, I just sat there, motionless, the phone glowing faintly on the floor. Then the landline rang, that old phone I kept out of habit, its shrill sound slicing through the air. I picked it up. Ellie! Ellie, honey, did you see Jackson's Instagram? It was Doris, my neighbor, her voice bubbling with excitement. He's in Rome, child. Eating fancy food with his wife and her mother. Lord, what a life they live. They look like movie stars. Rome. Fancy food. Movie stars. Meanwhile, here I sat with nothing but an empty account and an aching chest. I hung up quickly, unable to listen further. Slowly, I pulled out my old smartphone and typed in his name. I wasn't much for social media, but I had always followed him from a distance. And there it was. A smiling photo of Jackson, arm around Tanya, his wife, and Rhonda, her mother. He wore a crisp white shirt, wine glass raised to the Roman sky. The caption read, "Rome, my new beginning. I deserve this." In the comments, Tanya had written, "Good things come to those who wait. Thanks for everything, Mama-in-law Moneybag." I stared at the glowing screen until it blurred. They were laughing, living, celebrating, with the life I had worked decades to build. But even then, I did not cry. My eyes stayed dry, though my heart bled inside. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I didn't even throw the phone across the room, though it burned in my hand like hot coal. Instead, I smiled. A strange, quiet smile. Not joy. Not madness. Something else. Something stronger. Because in that moment, a truth hit me like lightning. I had nothing left to lose. And when a woman has nothing left to lose, she becomes dangerous. This wasn't the end of my story. No, this was just the beginning. The house was quiet that night, but my mind was anything but. I couldn't close my eyes. Each time I tried, memories came flooding back. Not of Rome, not of betrayal, but of the years I had poured into raising him. I remembered being just 14, scrubbing the floors of rich homes in neighborhoods that looked like palaces compared to mine. My hands cracked from the soap, my back sore from bending over all day. At night, I came home to a dark room, sometimes with no dinner waiting, sometimes with nothing but silence. Even then, I whispered to myself, one day, my child will live better than this. One day, he will never know this kind of hunger. And when Jackson came into this world, I believed that day had arrived. He was my miracle. His father had already disappeared, another broken promise, but I didn't care. I swore I would carry both roles, mother and father, provider and protector. I worked double shifts, sometimes 3, cleaning houses, washing dishes, taking whatever job I could find. I denied myself new shoes, new clothes, even medicine when I was sick, because every extra dollar went into Jackson's future. At 6 years old, he held my hand so tight on his first day of school that I thought my bones would break. "Don't leave me, Mama," he whispered. I promised him I never would. And I didn't. Not really. I remember the day one of my employers offered to pay for his private schooling if I agreed to work full-time and live in. I packed my things and moved to the rooftop of that house, just so he could have a chance at something better. Every weekend I would take the bus across the city, never arriving empty-handed. Sometimes it was a notebook, sometimes a toy car made of detergent caps, sometimes just a bag of cookies. It wasn't much, but it was everything I had. When Jackson turned 16, he told me, "Mom, when I make it big, the first thing I'll do is buy you a house where the walls don't leak and the cold doesn't get in." I didn't want the house. I just wanted him. "Don't buy me anything, son," I said. "Just don't forget me." But slowly, he did. It started small. Tanya came into his life during college, with her polished smile, sharp nails, and eyes that looked through me as if I were invisible. Her mother Rhonda was no different, carrying herself like royalty while wearing knockoff designer clothes. The first time they visited my house, Rhonda wrinkled her nose and said, "Such a rustic little place. Very humble." And Tanya whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "I don't know how Jackson survived here. This looks more like a shelter than a home." I smiled politely, but inside, something cracked. From then on, the distance grew. At first, Tanya suggested I not visit so often. They needed space as a couple. Then she decided I shouldn't come unannounced. Later, I was asked not to attend certain family events. Slowly, without me realizing it, I became a stranger in my own son's life. And Jackson, he didn't fight it. He drifted further with each passing year. I could see it in the way he lowered his head when I asked why he never visited. I could hear it in his voice when he said, "Mom, you don't understand this world anymore. Things aren't like they used to be. Tanya and I have big plans. You'll always be in my heart, Mama, but you can't be tied to me forever." Those words burned more than any flame, not because they were cruel, but because he meant them. I kept giving, even when it hurt. I sold the only piece of land my father left me so Jackson could pay his college enrollment fee. I wore second-hand clothes so he could have a proper suit for his first job interview. I even helped pay for his wedding, even though Tanya barely acknowledged me that day. And every time I thought, maybe this will bring us closer. Maybe he will remember. But he never did. Instead, the more I gave, the further he drifted. The more I sacrificed, the less he saw me. and the boy who once clung to my hand now treated me like a shadow from the past. I thought love was enough. I thought sacrifice would be remembered. I thought a mother's name could never be erased. I was wrong. Because as I sat there, staring at that glowing bank notification, the truth became painfully clear. All those years, all those sacrifices, all those dreams had turned into seeds. But not the seeds of gratitude. No, these were the seeds of ingratitude. And they had finally grown into betrayal. Days passed, but the weight in my chest only grew heavier. I kept asking myself, was it really my son? Could he truly do this to me? At first, I clung to denial like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. Maybe Tanya pushed him. Maybe Rhonda manipulated him. Maybe he didn't know. But the truth, it doesn't stay buried for long. One afternoon, I noticed something odd in the pile of old mail stacked on my kitchen table. An envelope from the bank, unopened. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a statement showing transactions I had never made. Transfers, large withdrawals, even insurance policies I didn't remember signing. I swallowed hard. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just my money disappearing. This was something bigger. That evening, I gathered the papers in an old grocery bag and walked to see Walter, my childhood neighbor, once a respected lawyer, now retired in an apartment overflowing with dusty books and yellowed case files. He was the kind of man who could read the truth between the lines of any document. "Walter," I whispered, sliding the papers across his cluttered desk, "tell me what this means." He adjusted his glasses, scanning each page carefully. The silence stretched. Then he sighed deeply, his voice heavy. "Ellie, this signature isn't yours, is it?" I looked closer. My name was there, scrawled in clumsy ink. But it wasn't mine. No. I can barely write more than my name, and even that looks different. This isn't me." He nodded grimly. "I thought so. They forged it. These documents put you down as guarantor on a joint account, and they've been withdrawing money little by little for months." The room spun. My knees went weak. My son hadn't just taken my savings. He had stolen my name, my identity, my dignity. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth, holding in the scream clawing its way up my throat. I wanted to collapse right there, but instead, I stood tall. I picked up the papers, tucked them back into the grocery bag, and whispered, "Thank you, Walter." I didn't cry that night. Not a single tear. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and began writing down every transaction I could remember. Every withdrawal, every date, every amount. My handwriting shook, but my determination did not. Because now, this wasn't just about money. It was about truth. The days that followed blurred together. I visited the public registry, asking about properties. That's when the clerk, bored and disinterested, slid a paper across the counter. My breath caught in my chest. It was a property form for my own house. My son had tried to register it under shared ownership. Only a technical error stopped it from going through. He had tried to take my home, the house I spent 30 years paying for, the only roof I had. I walked outside, my legs unsteady, and wandered into an old church down the street. I didn't go to pray. I sat on the wooden bench, staring at the flickering candles. My lips didn't form words, but my mind screamed, "Give me patience, God. Not to forgive him. Not to destroy him with my own hands." That night, as the city hummed with cars and stray dogs fought over scraps in the alley, I brewed myself chamomile tea. I opened my notebook again and wrote a single line in shaky handwriting. My son didn't die, but the mother in me did. From that moment, I changed. My back straightened. My voice steadied. My silence sharpened into something dangerous. The world thought I was broken, but I was not. I was awake. And my silence would hurt more than any scream. Rome glittered as if it had been polished just for them. Gold light spilled over the cobblestones, waiters floated across terraces with plates of truffle pasta, and a street violinist stitched romance into the night air. Jackson lifted a glass toward the moon, the rim catching a silver halo. Tanya leaned in for the photo, chin tilted, practiced smile, red nails resting on his shoulder like a signature. Rhonda adjusted her scarf, the imitation silk whispering as if it were real. "To new beginnings," Tanya said, and the stemware chimed. They laughed. They ate. They posted. Captions were poems of triumph. "Made it. We deserve this. New chapter." Comments trickled in like confetti. Hearts, flames, little crowns. But the truth had a different soundtrack. Between the clink of forks and the camera clicks, Jackson's pulse drummed its own warning. He felt it when the waiter set down the check and Tanya slid it across the table without looking. He felt it when Rhonda, eyes glittering, asked, "You did move the rest into the other account, right?" He forced a smile. "It's handled." Later, in the suite with a view of a black ribbon river, Rome breathed like a sleeping animal. Tanya stood on the balcony, city lights stippled across her face, phone glowing in her palm. "Tomorrow morning," she whispered, "we open Spain. Yes, we separate his name. No, he won't see it coming. He never does." Jackson paused in the doorway, the word separate hanging in the air like a cut rope. He backed away before she turned, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling where shadows formed a map with no roads home. Morning brought pastry flakes and espresso foam and a snapshot of them pretending to be a painting. Jackson tried to anchor himself to ordinary things, the sweet burn of coffee, the weight of the cup, the metal hiss of the milk steamer. But his mind kept drifting to a kitchen far away, an old armchair, a clock ticking a mother's time. "Stop brooding," Tanya said, guiding his chin toward the lens. "This is the life you wanted." He nodded for the camera and lied for the world. They moved through the day like tourists in a dream. The Colosseum's bones glowed. A fountain sang in a language of coins. Tanya breezed through high-end boutiques, dresses sweeping across her arms like new skins. Rhonda held open doors the way royalty holds history, lightly, as if everything were meant to part for her. "Card or cash, sir?" the clerk asked, folding a suit Jackson didn't remember choosing. "Card," Jackson said, and slid it forward. The terminal blinked. Then blinked again. The clerk smiled the way people smile when they are trained not to show pity. "Would you like to try another?" "Must be the chip," Jackson laughed, heat prickling the back of his neck. He tried another card. The machine hummed, considered, declined. Tanya's smile thinned. "We'll come back," she said, and swept the dress from the counter as if it had offended her. Outside, the sun was kind to everyone but him. "Tell me this is just a glitch," Tanya hissed. "We have reservations. We have plans." "Bank security," Jackson said, willing the lie into truth. "International flags happen." Rhonda's mouth curved. "In my experience, flags pop when accounts are improperly mixed." They kept moving. The city asked nothing from them but their wonder and their money. At lunch, a waiter with tired eyes presented a bill that cost 3 paychecks back home. "Same card," Jackson said, rehearsing calm. The screen answered. Declined. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final. Something small inside him fell and didn't land. Tanya's chair screeched against stone. "Are you kidding me?" she said, voice sharp enough to slice the sunlight. A few tables turned. A family paused mid-bite. "We'll fix it," Jackson murmured, throat dry. "We," Rhonda said, a soft laugh escaping. "Darling, we don't fix men. We replace them." They left the restaurant with their heads high and their shadows broken. By evening, the suite felt smaller. The balcony no longer opened to a city of possibility, just a distance measured in oceans and mistakes. Jackson sat on the edge of the bed and opened his laptop. Emails stacked like verdicts. One subject line glowed colder than the rest: account activity under review, temporary hold enacted. Another, international inquiry notice. He closed the laptop as if it had bitten him. "Who were you emailing?" Tanya asked from the doorway, her voice dipped in honey and steel. "No one," he said. "The bank." "Good," she replied, leaning one shoulder against the frame. "Because if this little situation ruins my plans, I won't be the one who pays for it." "What plans?" he asked, quieter than he meant to. She smiled without showing teeth. "The kind that don't include training wheels." Rhonda appeared behind her, already wearing a coat. "I booked another room," she announced. "Somewhere less embarrassing." The door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It contained everything he hadn't wanted to hear. Across the ocean, a kettle clicked off. Steam ghosted a small kitchen. A woman wrote a date in a red notebook and underlined it once. Jackson tried one more card, one more call, one more explanation that sounded foolish even to him. The hold remained, a glacier in the bloodstream of his life. At midnight, the phone on the nightstand vibrated with a message from Tanya. "Meet at 10. Embassy. Bring your ID." No hearts. No emojis. No pretense. He stood at the window, Rome bleeding neon onto wet streets, and saw two versions of himself. The man in the photos, all teeth and angles, and the reflection in the glass, hollowed and unedited. He pressed his forehead to the cool pain and whispered a name he hadn't said out loud in months. "Mom." On a block far away, a street violin wept something older than regret. In the morning, he walked into the bright white of an embassy corridor. Metal chairs. Neutral walls. A clock that didn't care who was late. Tanya chewed gum like a countdown. Rhonda scrolled through a feed where other people's lives were still working. A door opened. Jackson looked up, and the world tilted. There she was, gray sweater, dark scarf, posture straight as a verdict, carrying a yellow envelope like it was both weight and witness. His lips parted. No sound came. Tanya smirked, whispering, "Look who flew coach to the finale." The official said, "Mr. Price? This way." Jackson stood, legs unsteady. From the corner of the room, the woman with the envelope lifted her eyes. There was no storm there, only weathered sky. And for the first time since Rome began to sparkle, the illusion dimmed, and the truth stepped into the light. This was never a vacation. It was an arrival. And justice had just taken a seat. Morning sunlight poured through the cracked blinds, but it didn't warm me. My body felt older than ever, every joint stiff, every breath heavy. Yet, inside, something new burned. Not rage, not grief, something sharper. Resolve. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a witness. A witness to a crime committed not by strangers, but by the very blood I had given life to. I gathered every paper I had, bank statements, forged signatures, withdrawal slips. My hands trembled as I packed them neatly into a worn folder, the way a soldier packs weapons before battle. This wasn't money anymore. It was evidence. Walter, my old neighbor, walked with me to the courthouse. He had once been a lawyer, long retired, but I could see his fire spark again as he guided me through the maze of legal jargon. Elder financial abuse, he muttered, flipping through the pages. Forgery. Identity theft. We can freeze his accounts if we move quickly. We stood in line for hours. The clerk barely looked at me, her fingernails tapping against the keyboard as if my story were just another case number. But Walter pressed on, invoking every loophole he remembered from his practicing days. Papers were signed, stamps slammed down, and finally, an order was filed. Your son's accounts are under review, the clerk said flatly. Funds may be temporarily frozen pending investigation. Temporarily. Pending. Words heavy with uncertainty. But to me, they sounded like thunder. The first crack in a dam. That night, I bought a brand new notebook, its cover blood red. On the first page, with shaky but steady determination, I wrote, "To my son, I gave you my womb, my life, my dignity. You answered with betrayal. This is not revenge. This is justice. And justice is all I have left before I die." The word die echoed louder than the rest. Because just days earlier, a doctor had told me the truth I already felt in my bones. Leukemia. Advanced. 6 months if I was lucky. He had spoken gently, but his eyes carried no hope. There are treatments, he said. Chemotherapy. It might extend your time. Will it cure me? I asked. He paused. That pause was enough. Then no, I replied. I won't die in a hospital gown. I'll die standing. 6 months. For some, a curse. For me, it was enough. Enough to see justice done. Enough to make my silence louder than any scream. I walked home slowly that evening, the city blurring around me. The street where I once carried Jackson on my hip. The store where I worked scrubbing floors for pennies. The park bench where I once sat waiting for him to come out of school. Each memory stabbed, but it also fueled me. When I got home, I placed the red notebook on the table beside my tea. On one page, I wrote dates. On another, names. On another, instructions in case my body failed before my mission was complete. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had burned away. Because a mother's love can forgive almost anything, but a woman's dignity cannot. And when the two combine, mother and woman, the world learns a dangerous lesson. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. As I turned off the light that night, I whispered into the darkness. The countdown has begun. Justice doesn't always come with flashing sirens or pounding fists. Sometimes, it arrives in silence. And Jackson learned that silence in the most humiliating way possible. It started small. A cafe on a corner street in Rome, the kind of place where tourists line up for cappuccinos and croissants. Tanya ordered without hesitation, 2 espressos, 1 pastry stuffed with cream, another with chocolate. The waiter placed the check on the table, barely 20 euros. Jackson slid his card across with practiced confidence. The machine blinked. Declined. He forced a smile, handed over another. Declined again. The waiter's polite tone cut sharper than a knife. Do you have another form of payment, sir? Tanya's eyes narrowed, her cheeks flushing red. Are you kidding me? She hissed, snatching her purse. She paid in cash, tossing the bills like insults. Get it together, Jackson. This is embarrassing. By lunch, the embarrassment had turned into disaster. In a crowded trattoria, With tourists snapping photos and waiters bustling past, Jackson tried again. Different card. Same result. Declined. The sound wasn't loud, but it echoed louder than church bells in his head. Other tables glanced over. Tanya's jaw clenched, her nails tapping angrily against the table. Rhonda's laugh, low, sharp, poisonous, cut through the air. "I told you," she said, eyes glittering, "you can't trust a boy raised in poverty. They always drag you back down." Jackson froze, heat flooding his face. "It's a glitch," he muttered. "International systems, maybe security checks." "Or maybe," Tanya snapped, "you're exactly what everyone warned me about, useless." By evening, the truth couldn't be denied. His accounts weren't just empty, they were frozen. Every attempt to withdraw cash ended in rejection. Every online login came with the same cold message: suspicious activity. Account under investigation. The empire he thought he had built, all stolen brick by stolen brick, was crumbling in real time. Meanwhile, across the ocean, I sat in my small kitchen, sipping chamomile tea as the kettle whistled. The red notebook lay open in front of me, its pages filled with dates, signatures, proof. The papers Walter helped file had done their work. The freeze was active. The web was tightening. Sometimes revenge screams. Mine simply waited. Back in Rome, Tanya's patience snapped like glass. She packed her suitcase in silence, lips pressed tight, eyes flashing with fury. At the door, she turned once, her words slicing the air. "I don't stay with losers. My mother was right about you." And just like that, she was gone. Rhonda followed soon after, muttering to herself as she adjusted her scarf. "I warned her," she said coldly. "But she never listens. And you, boy, you're not even good enough to wash dishes." The door slammed. Jackson was alone. The hotel room felt like a tomb. His phone buzzed with notifications, each one worse than the last. Bank hold confirmed. Embassy appointment scheduled. Return to the United States under financial review. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. The man looking back wasn't the victorious son he thought he was. Not the man raising champagne glasses in Rome. This face was hollow, broken, stripped bare. And for the first time in years, he thought of me. Not the woman he had betrayed. Not the silence he had dismissed. But his mother. The one who had carried him on her back. The one who had skipped meals so he could eat. The one who whispered, "I love you," when the world gave him nothing. He picked up the phone with shaking hands. Dialed my number. I was in my kitchen, rinsing beans under the faucet, when it rang. For a second, I froze, staring at the old screen. I knew that voice before he even said a word. "Mom!" His voice cracked. "What did you do?" "They took everything from me. I'm alone. Tanya left. Rhonda too. They say you did this." I let the silence stretch. My heart trembled, but my voice stayed firm. "I didn't take anything from you, son. I just stopped what you were taking from me." "Mom, they want to arrest me. You said you'd always be there for me." I cut him off. "Until you stopped being there for yourself." A pause. I could hear his breathing, shaky, desperate. "Please, help me. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. My voice came out steady, sharper than steel. "Learn." Then I hung up. No tears. No apologies. No explanations. Because sometimes love teaches with hugs. And sometimes it teaches with pain. The night after I hung up the phone, sleep never came for Jackson. He wandered the streets of Rome like a ghost in borrowed clothes. His suitcase half empty, his wallet useless, his name tainted. He knocked on doors that no longer opened, called numbers that no longer answered. For the first time in his life, he was stripped of everything: money, pride, companionship. All he had left were his thoughts, and every thought circled back to me. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, I sat by the window in my old rocking chair, wrapped in a shawl. The neighborhood children played outside, their laughter a song I hadn't heard in years. One of them ran up with a wildflower and pressed it into my palm. I smiled, holding it as if it were treasure. The red notebook lay open on my lap. Tonight, I wrote not as a mother broken, but as a woman ready. My son, you were my fight, my pride, my life. I gave you everything, what I had and what I didn't, and I do not regret it. But love without limits becomes poison. You forgot who you were. You forgot who I was. So I must remind you, not with words you want to hear, but with truth you must face. Justice is not revenge. It is the last form of love I can give you. And if you ever find the strength to forgive yourself, this letter will be waiting, not to save you, but to prove I warned you. I placed the letter inside the notebook, closed it gently, and rested my hands over it. For the first time in many nights, I slept without fear. When Jackson's flight back to the United States landed, he was no longer the man who had left. The embassy's cold walls had reduced him to a name on a list. The investigation followed him like a shadow. Strangers pointed, whispers spread. The story of the ungrateful son who stole from his mother had gone viral. No one greeted him at the airport. No Tanya, no Rhonda, no colleagues. Just silence. He walked the cracked sidewalks of his old neighborhood, past the store where his mother once worked, past the park where she once sat, waiting for him with snacks she could barely afford. Every corner screamed memories. Every step was heavy with shame. Finally, he stood across the street from the old house. The porch light was on. The rocking chair was there. And in it, she sat, frail, thinner than he remembered, but still proud, still composed. She laughed softly with the children around her, offering them candies from a little jar. Jackson's throat tightened. He wanted to cross the street, to fall at her feet, to beg forgiveness. But his legs refused. He stayed hidden in the shadows, tears burning his eyes. Slowly, he set a bag of donuts on the porch and walked away. She didn't look up, but she knew. The next day, he returned. This time with flowers. Another day, with pastries. Each time, he left them quietly and disappeared before she could see him. He never knocked. He never asked to be let in. He had no right. Inside, I collected the small offerings, one by one. I never spoke of them, never acknowledged them. But in my heart, I knew he was trying. Weeks later, my body grew weaker. The illness moved faster than I expected. But I refused to let the sickness define my ending. I opened the red notebook one last time and wrote, "My son, love is not demanded. It is given. If you have learned that, then you are not lost anymore. Don't look for me when I'm gone. You will find me in every act of kindness you choose, in every mistake you refuse to repeat. If you wish to redeem yourself, begin not with me, but with the world around you. And when you meet another woman who reminds you of your mother, don't fail her. That will be my redemption." I signed my full name, folded the letter, and slipped it into an envelope marked in bold ink, "For Jackson." The morning I stopped breathing was bright. Sunlight streamed across my face. The rocking chair creaked one final time, and the red notebook rested on my lap like a sealed testimony. The neighbors found me there, peaceful, surrounded by wild flowers the children had left. No tears, no drama, just silence and dignity. When Jackson heard, he ran. For once, not to chase wealth, not to chase approval, but to chase what he had already lost. He walked into the small house, now filled with candles and soft voices of neighbors paying respect. He saw her lying still, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, notebook and envelope beside her. His knees buckled. He knelt, taking her cold hand in his. For the first time in years, he wept like a child. Not for money, not for reputation, but for the only love that had ever been unconditional. He opened the envelope. Read every word. And when he reached the end, he pressed the paper against his chest as if it could bring her back. That night, he sat in her rocking chair under the same sky she once gazed at. For the first time, he whispered not excuses, but truth. "Mom, I lost you, but I won't lose myself again." And in that silence, he realized something that would haunt him forever. He had stolen money, but what he truly lost was priceless, the dignity of a mother. Sometimes love teaches with warmth, sometimes with pain. But the hardest lesson of all is this: a mother's silence can be louder than any scream.